Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell.
All right, it's time once again for Music Night at the Majestic, and with us tonight, William Goldstein. William, welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here, Michael.
You say that now, William.
I can say it later as well. It's a phrase that easily rolls off my lips.
I'll tell you, I find you to be an absolutely fascinating individual, from the gift that you have for instant composition to the path that your career has taken, to all the technology that you've been involved in, to what you're doing with young people and instant composition. So, as I often say on the show, every artist's journey begins somewhere, though. So why don't we start at the beginning?
Before I was born or after conception?
Well, let's go for the time you were able to peck away at the keyboard. How's that?
I'm told I was about 3 or 4. I grew up in a non-musical family, no piano in the home, but my folks were in the hotel business, and during the summers, we lived in the summer hotel in Belmar, New Jersey, right on the beach, or across the street from the beach. Honestly. But when the hurricanes came, the beach came to us even across the street. But there was a piano in the ballroom, and I'm told 3 or 4 years old, I'd go to the ballroom and start picking away. And by the time I was 8 years old, they still hadn't bought me a piano. They bought my first piano when I was 8. By the time I'm 8, I go to the movie theater around the corner where you could buy a ticket during the day for 9 cents if you were a child. And I think it was 25 cents at night. And I'd come back and I'd play what I heard, 2 hands. I developed a classical technique, and I never took piano lessons. And then when I'm 9, I imagine it was one of the sophisticated guests in the hotel who inquired from my parents what they were doing, about the kid. What should we do? Well, you should do something. So I ended up at Columbia University being interviewed by Professor Raymond Burroughs at Teachers College. He was the leading piano pedagogue of the day. And he gave my mother all kinds of advice, none of which she ultimately took. It wasn't practical. We lived an hour and a half outside of the city of New Jersey, and I had a 3-year-old brother that was taking a lot of time. And in the old days, they'd send the kid to live with a family and send him to conservatory. But that wasn't going to fly. And my mother couldn't even manage to get me up once a week. And so she asked Burroughs, this is one of my earliest defining moments that I remember clearly. She asked Burroughs, well, if we can't do all of these things you're suggesting, because Burroughs was going to find me a teacher any day of the week, at any hour, just bring the kid up. Will we harm his chances of development, she asks. And Burroughs looks her in the eye and says, it would be like trying to stop the river heading towards the sea. He will continue to develop, and when he gets to a point where he needs a teacher, he will find one. And that's basically what happened. And I never did take piano lessons, but I did pick up trumpet in middle school, and made all-state band in high school, and was very serious about the instrument for a number of years until I realized between composing and piano, too much to keep up the trumpet as well. So I regretfully put it down early in my college years.
Tell me this, William, with your innate ability to transfer what you hear to the piano, did that also transfer to the trumpet?
Oh, of course. I mean, look, my gift really is very simple. I can speak the language of music as easily as everybody speaks the spoken language. We're having a conversation. It's not rehearsed. It's not hard. We can string sentences together. The words come in the right order. Nobody thinks about it. It's second nature. And that's the way it is when I'm speaking the language of music at the piano.
When did you compose your first, we'll say, elaborate piece, or more than just a 3-minute song, if you will?
Well, I'm sure I was making up things all the time, but I wasn't able to write anything down. I couldn't even notate when I was in my early teens. Um, although I do remember I had a wonderful high school music director named Frank Unger, and I learned to read treble clef so I could, you know, play trumpet and read music in the band. But he wanted me to play piano in the dance band, but I only could play in 3 keys at the time, and I certainly couldn't read the piano music. But I could play everything once I heard it, basically. So if he had things that were in the 3 keys I played in, which were C, F, and G. Of course, now my music is so chromatic, I don't stay in any one place very long. And I'm fluent in, wherever I am on the keyboard. But in those days, it was very interesting, and it was fun. But gradually, I learned. So I was a freshman in college when I was 17, and the idea of earning a living writing music or performing, just seemed remote. So I started off as a music education major. But when I was 18, I had a really terrific growth spurt, and I went from not being able to notate to being able to notate and orchestrate and whatnot. So when I was 18, I wrote my first orchestral composition, composed and orchestrated it, and it was performed when I was 19 by a local symphony orchestra in New Jersey, and they asked me to conduct it. I ended up on the front page of the Asbury Park Press, Bruce Springsteen's paper and area, and I still have the clipping. And I thought to myself, "Oh my goodness, this is incredible." The piece was very successful locally. If I could do this without studying composition, I wonder what happens if I study composition. So I decided to become a composition major, which meant starting all over again in college, year 1 composition. And this was after 2 years of the music education program. So I did that. I came to New York, and in the halls of Juilliard, Vittorio Giannini put his arms around me after I came out of a interview for the composition department at Juilliard and said, "Goldstein, I like you." He was always smoking a cigar. "I want you to come to Manhattan School of Music." This is in the halls of Juilliard. "Why, maestro?" "Well, because here you'll see me 1 hour a week, and there you'll see me 3 hours a week or 4 hours a week, whatever it was." And so I became a composition major at Manhattan School of Music. And by the time I was in my second year at Manhattan School of Music, I had already written a folk opera that CBS Television had produced. I was in the musical theater workshop that BMI had started, run by Lehman Engel, and I was on my way.
Tell me this, what composers, songwriters were influencing you in those early years?
Everyone I heard, but particularly the ones who wrote beautiful melodies. Early on, I suppose, songwriters like Jerome Kern and Richard Rodgers. I loved musical theater. Kurt Weill. I was influenced by Bernstein, Copland. I met Copland as a student, and I'm influenced by emotionally connected music. And when people ask me what kind of music I write, since I've done all kinds of things from pop and R&B to classical, I simply say emotionally connected. What I write, I like to think connects on an emotional level with people. So
that's the key.
It is the key, no matter what key the music is in. It's the key.
Exactly.
Emotion, no matter what key no matter what key the music is in, it is the emotional connectivity of that key and of the music that is what really moves us. For various reasons, well, mostly, I wasn't aware until 2011 that my ability to create in real time was uh, not common amongst my colleagues. I thought anybody who wrote music could just, speak the language as easily as I did. But when I discovered this, I also discovered that audiences respond in very emotional ways to what I'm doing, uh, which is surprising to me and surprising to them. And I'm not quite sure why that happens. Possibly it happens because uh, they're experiencing something they haven't experienced before. Not that my music is that great, but to witness something being created in their presence is really a virginal experience. And in a world where we are constantly bombarded by media and we're exposed to everything, there are very few experiences that one can have as an adult for the first time. And witnessing someone creating something seems to be something that creates an emotional response, I gather. There may be other factors involved, but I really don't know what they are.
Tell me this, when you're composing, is it a conscious thing where you're thinking, okay, this note should would follow, a good note to follow the preceding one is this, or does it just kind of flow subconsciously from you?
Well, if you're writing a paper or an essay, what's your process, Michael, if I can turn it around to you? You look at
It
it and you say, it would be better if I said it this way or that way. I mean, when I'm improvising a composition, I'm bypassing the the intellectual thought process. Very often, I record my instant compositions, and I will go back and make some editorial adjustments. And then, if I'm writing like a string orchestra piece or a conventional, I've started. I would love to do a piano concerto, which I feebly started, and I'm struggling because this is something that you just don't sit down and. I mean, yes, I sit down and I can record a lot of stuff, but putting it together, it takes time. And if I'm doing anything on paper, I'm not much faster than anybody else. Uh, it's a different thing. Once the mind gets involved, I'm just another guy putting his ideas down on paper. So it's much easier for me just to create in real time.
Yeah. Well, tell you, to jump forward here, one of the things that you did that I had read was the theme to ABC's AM America.
Yes, that was yeah, I did the package for the ABC morning show that preceded Good Morning America, and that's what got Barry Gordy excited, and the reason I was discovered and ended up as a Motown recording artist. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
see, that's
was
the thing, William, where I'm always amazed at how one project, can totally change a person's career trajectory, what have you. So you do that, and then Barry Gordy happens to see it, and you go from what you had been doing to now you're on Motown.
well. That was the interim step. What happened was Barry loved that theme. He must have heard it more than once and decided he wanted to release a record version of it. So Motown got in touch with me and we did a singles deal. A singles deal was we give you enough money to go into the studio, you record three sides, and that's it. So that's what the deal was. It wasn't an overall artist deal. I was going to be the artist on the release, of course, but it wasn't what eventually happened. But what happened was, so I recorded the AM America theme, which they released later on as Spirit of 76. It was 1976. It was the year of the bicentennial. I recorded a B-side called Southern Comfort. And then I thought to myself, what are you going to do for the third side, Bill? You know, and I thought, well, you can do anything you want, really, because they got the A side, they got the B side. What would you like to do? Well, I had been in January of 75, after that's when AM America went on the air. I finished the music package. I took a vacation. I went to a club med in Guadeloupe. Everybody was speaking the French language. It was very romantic. I met a girl down there. Got involved. There was a bar open to the sea with an old upright piano and a round circular piano bench. And I'd go swimming and I'd come out of the water and I'd lie on a blanket and I'd be, smelling of this wonderful combination of salt water and suntan lotion. And I'd pick myself up and I'd walk into the bar. There was nobody there during the day. I would sit at the piano and improvise. So I'm on a French island, so naturally I'm improvising stuff that is very French. And I must say, I love Michel Legrand, and I love all the Ravel and Debussy, and amongst all the others I love. And I had this idea that was going around in my head. And I said, why don't you do that? Also, there was a movie called Last Tango in Paris that had a really interesting score and some really hot sax solos, Gato Barbieri. And so I created a record called Rêve de Jeune Fille, Dreams of a Young Girl. And you can hear it. Motown put it on the Best of William Goldstein, which came out in 2009, which is a compilation of the work I did in the 70s, early 80s. This theme blew Barry away. He thought it was like an Oscar-winning song from a major motion picture. And that's when I got the call from Suzanne DePass, vice president of the label. Are you ready to be a star? Well, tell me more. And we'd like, what can you get here? I said, well, I'll call my lawyer. Let's, have something on paper, and then I'll be there. This was August of 75. I was out there in September. They wanted me to do movies. They wanted me as an artist on the label. They wanted me to produce other artists. It was like the dream opportunity of 100 lifetimes. It was just an incredible opportunity, all because of this one record. Barry loved this record so much he would not release it. He was saving it for the right movie, because once it was released, it would no longer be eligible for Oscar consideration. As I very well know, because I'm a very long time member of the Academy, served for many years on the Music Branch Executive Committee. So anyhow, Barry kept this song under the vest. The right movie never came along. So it wasn't released until 2009. And I made the recording in 1975. And I invite your listeners to check out The Best of William Goldstein, which is the name of the album on Motown, and listen to this beautiful, beautiful track. And that's how I ended up at Motown as an artist.
Then you also did production, correct? Producing?
I was a producer. Yeah, everything I did, I produced and composed, arranged, orchestrated, and very often played keyboards as well on the records. And on many of them, I was the artist as well, but I also produced Smokey Robinson, Thelma Houston, worked with Jermaine Jackson, Jerry Butler, Billy Preston, Sarita Wright, Stevie Wonder's wife, later Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis, Dionne Warwick. It really was an incredible time. And I must say, looking at the world we live in now and the racial conflicts and the divisiveness that comes out of divisiveness that comes out of demographics and diversity and inclusion. All I can say is I thought we were on the cusp of Martin Luther King's dream in the mid-late 70s, because I lived in an interracial bubble that was so unself-conscious, where people only were concerned about who you were and what you did and what you brought to the table. And it would be wonderful if the world can go back to that kind of thinking. If I might voice a little philosophy, and I'm a big fan of Dr. King's.
No arguments here. Tell me this, will you?
Yeah.
What are some of the sessions that you produced at that time that have stayed with you? Some of the more memorable ones.
All of them, really. All of them. Listen, I made some really good friends. I became very good friends with Guy Costa, who was the chief engineer at Motown Studios, which were located on Romaine Street in Los Angeles. They don't exist anymore. And the other engineers I worked with, the musicians I worked with, it was a short period of my life, but an amazingly influential one. I was actually scheduled to perform October 1st at a Motown celebration in Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills. And sadly, I came down with COVID. I tested positive the day before at the dress rehearsal day, and they wouldn't let me into the theater. So I'm on the program, but I did not appear. I'm in the program, but I was not on the program. But they're going to have other events, and I'm looking forward to participating. It was really a truly wonderful time.
Yeah. Tell me this, being a piano guy, working with Billy Preston, what sticks out from working with him?
Well, I only made one record with him, and that was a cover of A Candle in the Wind, which was done for a movie called Marilyn, the Untold Story, which was a very interesting movie because it was produced and directed by a man named Lawrence Schiller, who was Marilyn's last photographer. And there's a wonderful music video I put together when the soundtrack was released in conjunction with Larry Schiller's Vanity Fair release. Vanity Fair gave him a whole issue of just never before published photos he took of Marilyn, which coordinated with the release of a $1,000 Taschen tabletop book. And Larry gave me permission to use any of the photos I wanted. And it's a beautiful music video you can find online promoting the soundtrack of Marilyn, the Untold Story, which had a couple of songs recorded by Sarita Wright and the cover that Billy Preston did of Candle in the Wind. He's an amazing guy. I can't claim to have known him too well. We just did the one record together, but memorable.
I'm sure. Well, you mentioned movies, scoring movies, what have you.
Yes.
How did you start working on scores for movies?
Well, I started doing commercials in New York, and I think I had done the documentary maybe. And then the Vietnam War came along, and I was fortunate enough to end up in, I was going to get drafted. I ended up as a composer in residence for the United States Army Band in Washington. And that was incredible. And when I got out, BMI, Rod Anton at BMI had arranged for me to be under contract to Columbia Pictures Screen Gems, which was the music publisher that had all of the hit songwriters of the day: Carole King, Barry Mann, Cynthia Wilde, Jerry Goffin, Carol Bear Sager. That's where I got my first record, and it's where I got my first movie, which was an independent feature that starred Jackie Mason called The Stoolie. And that's got a lovely soundtrack, which has been released under the title of My First Film Score. So that was my first movie. And then when Barry signed me, they wanted me to do movies. And my first big studio pictures were actually through Motown. The first one at Universal Studios was the Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings, which is a really terrific movie about a black baseball team barnstorming around the South before teams were integrated. And then after that movie, I did another one at MGM called Norman, Is That You? Which starred Red Fox and Pearl Bailey and had two songs in it, one recorded by Smokey Robinson and one by Thelma Houston. Those were my first major studio pictures.
Scoring a film, how does that, how is that different, I should say, from doing a straightforward personal composition?
Well, obviously it's probably like, composing an opera or some dramatic thing. You have music that's got to fit in a very beautiful way with the images, and you sometimes play along with the images. Sometimes you want to play against them. For instance, if you had a violent battle scene, you could do very agitated, or you could play something hauntingly slow. You could do Barbara's Adagio for strings over all of this violence on the screen, which is often done actually, rather than playing with it, you play against it. And I know I used to lecture on music and film, and I remember taking a clip of World War II newsreel taken from a Navy ship of a plane being shot down. Now, depending upon the music you put to this video, you could put music that would make you cheer for this plane being shot down. And then you could put music behind it that would say, oh no, look how tragic. Music is extraordinarily manipulative. It is the most direct route to the emotions, unquestionably.
Absolutely. Well, in addition to film, you've also done a lot of work in television. Now, with television, I'm guessing you've got a very quick turnaround as opposed to film.
Yes, generally speaking, yes. Particularly, I only did one series that was called Fame, and that was intense. Turnaround was about 4 days on average for a score. And when I was hired to do Fame, I came in after they'd hired somebody else and they didn't like it. So I was hired to do the first 10 episodes, was it? And I did them. And initially, when I started doing Fame, I was still doing all my own orchestrations. But that show proved to me that to stay alive in Hollywood, you had to, find a support crew and people to orchestrate, because some of it was impossible. One Fame episode, there was a ballet. The ballet was 4 minutes, and I knew that it would take me all 4 days to do the ballet, and I'd have to work my ass off to get that done. So I brought someone in to orchestrate the rest of the show, a gentleman named Alf Clausen, who went on to have quite a career on his own, mostly with The Simpsons.
Moonlighting.
Did he do Moonlighting?
Yeah, he did Moonlighting, and then I believe he also did Alf, and then I remember The Critic too, among other things.
I'm not sure, but anyhow, a very talented fellow. And I know when he first worked for me, I wanted to look over all the orchestrations before he went to the studio. But he got my style of orchestration down so well that after a while, I would bring him in and I would work with him for an hour or two, just recording on the piano the cues, and then they'd be transcribed. He'd orchestrate them, and I wouldn't even look. I'd just get into the studio and get up and conduct them. And they were all wonderful. And then I would focus on a few things every week that I wanted to orchestrate. So that taught me a bit. And then I went on to do a lot of action movies. And action movies, you need tons of orchestrators. There's just so much to do. So, and then in the mid '80s, I pioneered the electronic stuff and did a few electronic scores where I played every note of every instrument, and thought, my God, that is cool. I can play every note of every instrument. And it wasn't too long before what was cool became, oh my God, I have to play every note of every instrument. And so I did a few of those, and I'm glad I did them. I think the first one was Ocean Quest. That was the groundbreaker. That was the first score ever recorded on a computer for film or television. CBS Masterworks released the soundtrack. Entertainment Tonight came up and did an interview with me, which you can see on YouTube. If you search Entertainment Tonight, William Goldstein, it will come up. And the LA Times did a big story, and that's where I really changed the way everybody in music works today, because everybody now uses the same techniques that I was developing and pioneering then. And then I did Shocker for Wes Craven. I had done a Twilight Zone that was very un-Wes Craven. It was a very poetic, romantic little piece, and Wes loved the score, so he brought me in to do Shocker. And generally, I don't really enjoy genre films, but I was able to do some really interesting stuff, taking sound effects and building them into the score, and also trying to bring some humanity and compassion to some of the characters in this genre film. So I think if anybody, excuse me, takes the time to listen to Shocker, you'll find it's a very different kind of genre score.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned Ocean Quest. It was just a couple of years after that that you did the King's Quest 4 video game.
Yes, I did the first video game score, and in that process helped develop the sound card.
Yeah, tell me about that. I'm really interested in that.
Well, the folks at Sierra Online flew me by a private plane out to Sierra Online. Private plane, a two-seater, to get to their headquarters, and we want you to do a score. And of course, I asked the question, well, great, and what's the score going to be played on? But we don't know. At that time, a computer could make 3 different sounds, 3 pitches. And I had already had a relationship with Roland Corporation, because it was their software I used to do Ocean Quest in 1985. I think King's Quest 4 was 87. And I knew the president of the company. I also knew that they had a consumer module synthesizer called an MT32. And from the offices of Sierra Line, I called Tom Beckman and said, Tom, do you think you guys could put the MT32 on a card that would go in a slot in a PC? Absolutely, he said. And that was beginning of the sound card. I mean, there were other companies developing other types of sound cards, but I think that was one of the first. And I also beta tested the MPU 401, which was the first MIDI interface, also developed by Roland. And I remember the first MPU 401, which was a card that went in a slot in the computer through which you'd hook up your MIDI ins and outs. The first one they sent me didn't work, and I almost tore my hair out, and I had a lot more hair in those days. And I was ready to give up, and they sent me another card, and the other card worked flawlessly, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Amazing story.
It was a very exciting time to be pioneering and to go where others were yet to go. And there was nobody to teach you. There was nobody to call. I did work with the developers of the software and the technology. That's who I worked with when I had issues, but it was a learning process. I had to go out and buy a computer. Didn't know anything about computers. Didn't know I had a knack for technology either. But once I got a computer and I started fooling around with it, when they're not extremely challenging and frustrating, they're wonderful.
Exactly. As we well know.
Yeah, we do. We do.
I'll tell you, you mentioned about nobody to teach you. You are involved in some impromptu composition events where you're working with young people. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I do master classes. Even before I discovered that my ability to create in real time was somewhat unique, I was a founding director of the California State Summer School for the Arts, which is a program in California, half funded by the state and half by private industry. It's a program for high school students in the arts, and we would take over a campus, mostly Cal Arts, during the summer for a 4 or 5 week program. And as a board member, I thought I should, besides just forming policy, I should get out there and do a class every year. So I started doing classes at the school, on music and film. And then one point, the artistic director of the program at the time, a man named Rob Jaffe, who sadly left us some time ago, somehow knew that I was able to create in real time. I don't remember how he found out, but before the world told me this was special, he told me it was special. He said, anybody can talk about music and film. Why don't you start sharing with the students your ability to create in real time and see if you can help them access their creative instincts in a more direct way. And so I started doing that. And it was very gratifying for the most part. I started having people step up to the piano, pick 3 notes, and I'd have them pick 3 notes so I could demonstrate that what I was going to create was not a piece I'd already walked into. I'd just create a piece, and that would be it. And it was fascinating. And by the way, happy to do that for you, because behind me is my grand piano. You can see the lid.
I see that, yes.
And there's a keyboard there. Yeah. So that's a possibility too.
Yeah, I've seen the clips of you doing that, where you have the student person, what have you, come up and hit the 3 notes, then you just compose right there.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. Say to me, that's just unbelievable.
Well, we did a very interesting about a year ago, an NPR interview, Here and Now, and the host picked three notes, and she was in Boston, and I was in LA, and did this, and at the end of the broadcast, she said, "Oh my God, you got me! I cried." So yeah, there's something going on.
Well, speaking of things going on, with all the things you've done, what projects do you currently have going on?
Well, let's see. Next month, I'm going to Tallinn, Estonia, where I'm going to be a guest artist at the Black Nights Film Festival, which is an A-level international film festival, like the more famous ones you've heard of, like Cannes and Venice. It's an A-level festival, and having a music component called Music Meets Film. And they want me to improvise a score in concert in front of the audience to a feature-length film or documentary that I will see for the first time in concert. So that's an upcoming challenge. My most recent release on September 23rd is a piece called 88. Released it as a single. It's a homage to my late friend Mike Lang. It's called 88, Homage a Mike Lang, A Life Well Played. Mike was an incredible pianist, an intellectual, played on so many movie scores and hit records, and essentially a jazz pianist. So this record has got, it was an instant composition. I wrote it about 30 minutes after I found out that Mike died, and it took me 30 minutes to get home to my piano, and I immediately sat down and recorded this piece. There's another piece I've done a few of these obituary pieces. There's a piece called Why Anne. Anne was a friend who got killed in an auto accident, and her husband was so distraught. I was so moved at the memorial service that I sat down at the piano and I did this piece. And a year after, I gave it to him about a few days after she passed away. And a year later, he comes to me and said, "Anne loved music. I'm going to remember this first year memorial of her passing with a concert. I'm hiring a 30-piece orchestra. I want you to orchestrate the piece that you wrote." And I did. And you can hear both versions online. They're both on my albums, and they're the video of the orchestra performances on YouTube. People search "Why Anne" William Goldstein, it had come up. That was a very unusual experience because the piano piece was very stark and naked. And I said to my friend Lee, I said, "Lee, orchestrate this. It's going to be different." And it's a little different, but it's the same piece. So that was an interesting exercise. And then other recent projects. Actually, it's been a very busy year. In May, I released Remembering Mariupol, which was my response to Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine brutally. And I wanted to release it immediately, but I had a release scheduled for April 23rd, another wonderful album called Brushstrokes, The Intersection of Art and Music. And that came out in April. And my distributor, the Orchard, said, "You cannot release this till May 20th." So I put a video together of the first movement of Remembering Mariupol, called By the Sea, and released it early March, and then waited till May 20th for the release of the album. But Brushstrokes is fascinating, done with a young Chinese violinist named Pei Wen Liao. It's really beautiful, and each piece is individual. And unlike Mussorgsky's pictures at an exhibition, where he was inspired by the paintings, I was looking for a theme to unite the disparate pieces that were created by Pei Wen and myself, and I came up with the concept of marrying each composition to a work of art, and that's a beautiful album. But remembering Mariupol, thanks to Vladimir Putin and the incredible, horrific war that's going on, is now over 875,000 streams for a four-movement classical solo piano piece. It's kind of amazing.
I'd say.
And that's just since May 20th. I'll find out later today whether Amazon will renew me on their solo classical piano playlist, which is the reason Apple and Amazon have kept me on the playlists for this piece, which is why it's generating these numbers. That's the way of the world these days, playlists. And you can't pay to get on them. They have to select you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really pretty exciting, actually, to have those kinds of numbers. So I've been pretty busy. I have an idea what I'm going to do next, but we'll take a little time on that.
Tell me this, out of all the quite diverse things that you've been able to do, what's something that you haven't yet that you want to add to your repertoire?
Well, I really would love to finish this piano concerto, and I usually don't write anything unless I'm commissioned, but nobody's stepped up to the plate and commissioned it. So I came up with an idea, having pioneered so much in technology. I approached the Spitfire sound library with the concept if they would work with me and provide me the resources of their library, I would create a piano concerto and their library would be the orchestra, and I will release it internationally. If I ever finish it, it would probably be the first released classical orchestral composition released, with a real sounding but ersatz orchestra from a sample library, and we'll see if I ever get to finish it. Right now, I started it, but I've been so distracted with other projects that I haven't gotten to it. And I know I'm in New York now, and when I get back to Los Angeles, I have just a couple of weeks to prepare to go back to Europe and then come back to New York, and it'll happen when it happens.
Can't force it.
Well, there's pressure on myself, but honestly, it's such a chore. And if I do it, I'm certainly going to bring in help with the orchestration and the programming of the orchestral parts, because at this point in my life, I really don't want to take the time to play every part of every instrument. I'll indicate what they are and let somebody else do some of the heavy lifting.
There you go. Well, tell me this, William. We've covered
Yes.
quite a bit. Is there anything that we didn't get to?
I'm sure there is, but I only know what I think I know. I'm not even sure what I know. I know. I mean, how can you really be sure of anything in the world we live in? The one constant in life is change, of course. So, but I'm delighted to have an opportunity to chat with you. And oh yes, I see. My God, it's gone very quickly. Well,
hopefully that's a good thing.
Yes, it's a very good thing, and I'll look forward to getting a link to this and later evaluating how I did. It's like when I'm doing instant composition, I never know how well I've done until I listen back, because I don't remember anything once I've done it. So,
right. I'll tell you what, William, we've had your websites and social media and all that stuff scrolling across the bottom of the screen throughout the show.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So people can find you and watch the videos and access your music.
Well, thank you. I am on every streaming service. So whatever your favorite listening thing is, just put William Goldstein in there at Spotify or Apple or Amazon or Deezer or whatever. Tidal. I'm sure there are many more, but
yeah,
a real pleasure, Michael.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was really looking forward to this one, William. So very enjoyable.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, everyone. With that, we will bring this one to a close. I want to thank you for watching. William, thank you for being here. Everybody have a good night.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time for Music Night at the Majestic. This is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.